Welcome to my channel. This is an indication of some of the things that I cover on a regular basis in my videos. If you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to do so, and don't forget to click the little bell so that you'll get notified of future videos. Please feel free to share my videos on your social media, and I hope you enjoy the video which follows.
Well, hello everybody. A bit of a different setup now. I hope it works out. It's a movable kitchen island that I bought. That doesn't have wheels. I thought if I got one with wheels I'd be chasing it while I'm doing the video. It came sort of flat packed like IKEA does, but it came from Canadian Tire. I'm very impressed with the thing. I found it on sale, marked $90, marked off the regular price, so I grabbed the thing. I think I'm doing this mainly because of a new channel that I started watching in Newfoundland. Bonita's channel, I think it's called. Put a link below, I guess, but I can't quite remember the name. But I'm convinced that's what she's done. She has a lovely, much larger kitchen than I have. But she seems to be using an island type thing that can be moved into different positions. So I thought, well, this way you'll get to look actually at me. That ought to get rid of a lot of my subscribers. What I'm going to do today is sort of following a King Arthur flour recipe, and I say sort of. This is my version of it. I will put the link to the King Arthur flour recipe down below, and you can follow it exactly if you want, but as I go along I'll explain to you what I'm doing that is a bit different. It's called a cinnamon apple flatbread, and in my opinion it's like a focaccia flatbread with a flavored apple topping, so it makes it into a dessert rather than a savory bread. But it's quite interested me. It was sent to me by one of my subscribers. Thank you very much. Sent me the link, and I've been thinking about it for some time and finally getting around to trying it. So I'll sort of read off some of the instructions, the ingredients for you, and explain as I go the things that I'm doing differently. Now the first ingredient is a cup of ripe sourdough starter, either discarded or from your feeding your starter or whatever. However, if you're already ready to turn this off because you don't have sourdough, I just wouldn't even think about it. Eliminate it. It isn't going to do a thing for this recipe that I can think of. Sourdough is a very slow acting for leavening, and this is using 2 teaspoons of instant yeast for the leavening, and the bread is made very quickly. A cup of sourdough starter, I suppose, could add a bit of sourdough flavor, but I doubt that that will even be noticed in the recipe. The thing you have to remember about King Arthur flour's recipes, they're good, they work, they're delicious, but the idea of their recipes on their website is to sell products that they sell, and they of course sell a sourdough starter. So that, in my opinion, I'm going to use it, but in my opinion you could eliminate that and come up with the same end product here. 3/4 of a cup of lukewarm water, 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. They're of course recommending King Arthur, mine isn't, but any unbleached or even any all-purpose flour would work just well. That's 3 cups, or if you want to weigh it, that's 360 grams, and I did weigh, of course, I like to weigh. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm using a sea salt, any table salt would be fine. 2 tablespoons of special dry milk, Baker's special dry milk, or non-fat dry milk. Once again, that's a product that King Arthur sells, and I didn't go out and buy any dry milk powder to make this bread, so you just have to look at the end product here and see if you think that worked out, but I'm not doing that. 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and the filling that goes on top is 4 very large apples, it said. Well, these were the largest that I could find, and they are, what are they? They're Honeycrisp, I guess. They looked nice in the shop, so those are the ones that I bought. 1/4 cup of boiled cider, and boiled cider is a King Arthur flour product, and perhaps other companies make it as well. I just happened to have that because it was also a gift from one of my subscribers last year, so I am using the 1/4 cup of boiled apple cider. It suggests a substitute of thawed frozen apple juice concentrate, which I guess you can probably find in the frozen juice section of your supermarket. I would say that you could just double the next product here, which is maple syrup, pure maple syrup, a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. So I think if you didn't have this, you could use a 1/2 cup of maple syrup, and that would end up being probably even better. I love the taste of maple syrup. I'm getting a boing in my pocket on my cell phone here. The topping has added to it a 1/4 cup of cinnamon, Baker's cinnamon filling, another King Arthur product, or cinnamon sugar. I have a 1/4 cup of sugar with very little cinnamon. I didn't want the cinnamon to overpower these other two flavorings, so perhaps it has a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon or so. I didn't really measure it. And we're going to be using a 1/4 cup of the reserve juices after we cook the apples. They're cooked before they go on top. And 2 to 3 tablespoons of coarse white sparkling sugar, which is optional. I don't have that, but I do have something that one of my subscribers sent me after I keep talking about my gifts from my subscribers. I'm not soliciting more. I have mentioned several times the use of pearl sugar. And I said I've never seen it in a shop. Well, one of my Canadian subscribers, I think from Montreal if I remember correctly, sent me a bag of pearl sugar. And I'm very surprised. I thought pearl sugar would be little round pearls of sugar. It is little pieces of sugar, but they're not round at all. They're just little pieces of sugar. I'm going to sprinkle some of that on top. So let's get some of this cleared away, and we'll make the dough first. Well, the first thing to do is to combine all of the bread dough ingredients. Flour, salt, yeast. That's the dry ingredients. I think I would just sort of mix those in a bit. And add the wet ingredients. Sourdough starter. And as I said, if you don't have sourdough starter, this will work quite well, I think, without it. You probably will need to add a bit more liquid. I wouldn't add a lot more. It probably doesn't need the full cup, but I'm going with 3/4 cup of water here, as the recipe suggests. Perhaps up to a cup, but I would just keep adding until you have the amount of hydration that you want, I guess. That was the water. And here goes the olive oil. This is very much like a focaccia. I guess I'll get my hands into it now. Not to leave too much behind here. And we need a bit of flour in a minute, so I might as well bring that over, I guess. Combined quite nicely, but I want to knead it for a bit. I'm going to do this by hand rather than the stand mixer. Such a small amount of dough doesn't seem like it would be a good idea to dirty the stand mixer for it. Doesn't have to be needed for a long period of time, but I'm going to develop the gluten a little bit and thoroughly mix in the ingredients. I can still see olive oil yellow showing up in there. When this table is put away or put up against the side of this wall here, it has storage space down below where I've put a lot of equipment that was double stacked in other areas of my little kitchen. But this part of it is a leaf that folds down, so that it's 30 inches wide here now, and it's 4 feet 48 inches long. But it becomes much narrower when you store it away. I think that's probably close to being good enough. Doesn't require a lot of kneading. Now the bowl. Bowl scraper. When the bowl gets lightly oiled, I'm going to use a little olive oil. I find the easiest way to oil the bowl is at the same time you're oiling the bread, the dough. Now this gets set aside until it has doubled in bulk in a warm location. So I will find the warmest location I can. My house is never too terribly hot in the wintertime. But now we'll make the filling. Or not the filling, the topping. Well, the first thing here is to peel and slice the apples. Peel, core, and slice. I'm going to use my trusty apple peeler here, which I love. If I can get it to go. I'm wrong. Okay. There we go. Probably seen me use this before. It peels, cores, and slices the apple all in one easy motion. There's the core and there's the peeled apple. I always give this little bit here with the skin left on it to me. When you slice them, you just put a knife down through. Nice uniform thin slices, which King Arthur Flour talks about the method of doing it by hand, which is fine. I suspect that's what most people will do. When it comes to cooking them, they're recommending microwave. I think it says 9 minutes in the microwave. Their slices, I think, were much thicker than mine. I'm not going to trust myself with a microwave. I think I'd probably end up with mush. Oops. My suction cup is sort of not doing its job for some reason. Before I cut it, I didn't show you before, I guess, but it's sort of, you get a spiral of apple. Very unique little machine. I wouldn't be surprised if King Arthur Flour probably sells those too. Had mine for many years, not sure where I got it. I'll bring you back when I finish this and ready to cook the apples. Well, the next part here is to cook the apples. As I said, King Arthur flour, you'll notice in the recipe says microwave. I'm just concerned that I'd end up with mush. You just cook them until they're still holding their shape, but they're tender. So partially cooked, I guess, would be the best way of describing it. And you add the boiled cider if you have boiled cider. Which is delicious, a little tart. And the maple syrup. Delicious. And this is another new gizmo, also Canadian Tire. You can pay a lot of money for them. I did not. This was $30. It works on butane. I only had it for a week or so, but I've used it for several different things. I really like it. Another one of those things that comes with the warning not to use it in a confined space like a tent, or well, that would be silly, but it also says in a house, but as you see, I'm using it. You can't see just off screen here is a propane stove that has 4 burners, an oven and a broiler, none of which are vented. So I'm really not concerned about this one little flame producing any great amount of carbon monoxide. All fires produce some carbon monoxide, but I think in a large space you've got nothing to worry about using this little thing. Well, I'm going to have to tend this carefully. The video will be hours long if I don't cut some things out, so I'll bring you back once these are, I feel, ready to come off the burner here. Well, it has been, I don't know, about 10 minutes, I guess. And it has reduced the amount of apple in there quite a bit. Also a lot more liquid than there was with the half cup of liquids that we added. But I'm turning the heat off. I have to have a 1/4 cup of the liquid. And that's a lot more than a 1/4 cup, but that's good. I will finish draining these and just set them aside to cool while the bread continues to do its rise. And I'll bring you back when we are ready to move on and put the toppings on. Well, the dough has been rising for almost 2 hours. As I said, my house is not terribly hot in the winter time, but I think it's ready. Instructions are to spray your baking tray. That's to prevent it from sticking, and then to drizzle it with olive oil, and that is to make the crust, bottom crust, crisp, and to give it some extra flavor, I guess, too. Just deflate this and see how it works. I'm using a tray that is a little bit smaller than what they recommend, so I'm hoping that means I won't have too much difficulty getting the dough to cover the tray. Their suggestion is, if you can't stretch it to cover the tray, to let it rest for 20 minutes or so and then come back at it again, which I may have to do. And you may have to do that, it says, more than once. It's stretching pretty well, but I don't know. it has to. I don't think the finished product has to be perfectly rectangular to begin with. Gives it a more homemade look if it's. I think that will probably do. It'll probably shrink back a bit, but such is life. And the apples have really cooled. Just distribute them over the surface. Hands were made before forks and knives, right? Give it a nice apple coating. I think that's pretty well covered. And now the 1/4 cup of reserved juice gets drizzled over the top. And in my case, the cinnamon and sugar gets sprinkled on. The sugar will be appreciated, actually. I've sampled the apples, and that boiled cider is a nice flavor, but it's tart. And I think these apples would have been quite sweet on their own, but they have a tart taste to them, so adding the sugar to the top will be a good addition, I think. Now this gets covered, tea towel or whatever, and for at least an hour it's allowed to rise and sort of double in its thickness. And it will be baked in a 425 degree Fahrenheit oven, so I will be preheating the oven during that hour. Bring you back when it's time for this to go in the oven. Well, I'm always forgetting something, and this time it was the pearl sugar that I said I was going to add. I'm not going to add a lot. It's fairly good sized lumps of sugar, but it'll be a little different addition. I've never used it before, so I thought it would be a good chance to try it. And now it is actually ready to have its hour off to relax and rise. Well, what do you think? It just arrived, so I put it on. This has been well over an hour and a half at least, maybe an hour and 3/4, and it has risen quite a bit. And I have the oven almost up to temperature, so soon it will be going in the oven for, what does it say here? 25 to 30 minutes at 425 degrees. So we will see what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Well, I did mine for 25 minutes and it looks done to me. The outside edges are quite brown, and some of the pieces of apple that are sticking up were a little burnt on the ends. Now to wait for it to cool so that I can cut it and see what the thing tastes like. Well, it's been out of the pan for a few minutes, and the serving suggestions are to serve it warm, so I'll see if I can't cut a piece. I'm trying to decide where I want to cut. Came out of the pan quite easily. It'd be cutting easier, I think, if it was on the cutting board. But we'll see. Got just a little separated. The smell when it was baking was like you were baking an apple pie. And it has a nice apple pie flavor to it. To the topping anyway. It's a nice crispy focaccia type bread. I taste the cinnamon and just sweetness, I guess, in the background. I can't really distinguish the boiled cider or the maple syrup. And I don't taste, as I thought I wouldn't, I don't taste any sourdough, so you could do this with or without your sourdough. It's quite good. And not all that difficult to make. So if you think you want to give this a try, let me know how yours turns out. Could probably done with other fruit as well. I was thinking like peaches or something like that would be nice on top. But it's a different sort of a dessert anyway, and I think I'll enjoy it. Well, thank you very much for watching.